So last week I started talking about the things we need to teach our kids as they live in and go through this crazy world that we're in. I wrote a blog post about it. I mentioned that. You can go check that out at jeremystolniker.com. But there are some lessons, some essential lessons, and I boiled it down to 7 that we need to teach our kids. The world is crazy. It's getting crazier. It's not going to get better. Hopefully things will balance out, but then we'll have other lows and followed by hopefully some highs. But this is how life works. And this is how it's always worked. And as parents, we need to be very diligent about teaching our kids the right things. But boiling the right things down to exactly the most essential right things can be a challenge. I understand that. As a parent, I had to break this down into basically 7 categories, and that's what I've been talking about. Last week, I mentioned that the number one thing we need to teach our kids in this crazy world is that God is and always will be the goal. We need to live for God, and our kids need to point their lives toward God. These next 2 I'm going to combine into this video because they go together. We need to help our kids learn history. When we're talking to our kids about the future, we need to teach them the past. Why is it that so many people right now are talking about unprecedented times? They're saying we're living through unprecedented times. There's never been anything like this. Why do people keep saying that? Because they don't know history. People that know history understand that humanity has always existed through unprecedented times. The first time humanity has gotten there was the first time anyone got there. It was unprecedented. But there have always been incidents. There have always been times and periods where it's been very similar to this. There have been ups and there have been downs. There have been difficult times and good times. There have been times that are much more difficult than this. And we as a society and we as a culture and we as a country, we've lived through it. We've made it. And we can and we will. Unprecedented times are not as unprecedented as we think they are. And when we realize that times like this have always been, then we can have hope. Learn history. Teach your kids history. Help them to get the context for the present and a path for the future by learning the past. And as you teach them history, teach them this next lesson. This is number 3 on my list of 7. This is it. Number 3, teach them to take their place in history. This is something else that drives me insane. If we believe that God is sovereign, God is in and overall, God has a plan, then we also have to believe that God put us here when He decided to put us here. In His time, He put us here. In this moment in history, God placed us here. What that means is the goal for us should not be to simply survive, to get by somehow, to hopefully make it. The goal should be to take our place in history, to seize who we are and where God has placed us, to be everything He's created us to be, to make a difference, to make a mark in this moment in time. You are exactly where God wants you to be, at the moment in time in which He wants you to be there. And we need to teach our kids to take their place in history, to fully be in this moment what God has always created them to be. Stop looking back and wishing you were somewhere else. Be where you are and be entirely that. So, today, what do we need to teach our kids in these crazy, unprecedented times? We need to teach them history. We need to teach them how to look back so that they can look forward, gaining the context for the present by realizing that these so-called unprecedented times are not unprecedented at all. That we as a nation, we as a world have lived through times like this and some much more difficult before, and we've managed to move through them. That puts context and gives hope. And then looking back and learning history, the next thing we need to teach in this crazy world is that our kids need to take their place in history. This is where God placed you. This is when He placed you here. Understanding what has been, knowing that something similar will be. Seize where you are and be all that God has created you to be. Make a dent in the universe right now.